Hello, everyone.
Hello. It has been a long, long time since the last episode, about 6 weeks
I
by
know
my reckoning.
for
So,
waiting patiently for this latest episode. Very sorry it's been so long, but life gets in the way.
it absolutely does, unfortunately.
But
You know,
thank God that absolutely nothing has happened in the 6 weeks we've been off air.
oh God, thank God for that, because I'd hate it if we actually had something to talk about.
I know,
That would be awful, wouldn't it?
I know, it'd be terrible. Um,
Mhm.
Thankfully, that's not the case this week. We've got a lot to talk about. Actually, for the first time, we've actually had to, limit the amount of things we're going to talk about.
Yeah, just a bit. It's interesting. We've had so many important changes recently, such as like the easing of lockdown. Is obviously a big thing at the moment, and you get various people taking the piss and various people, uh, sort of still being uber paranoid.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah,
Can I just say something on the masks? I know we've got loads to talk about, but
oh yes, absolutely, please do. Yeah,
just want to talk about the new COVID restrictions because I've been on quite a journey with regard to the social distancing, and
mm.
this last week has been the first, or 2 weeks has been the first time I've basically seen the centre of town
Yeah,
since March, and during that time I've been working as a key worker in the public sector throughout the whole of lockdown. So I've done nothing apart from go to work, come back home, go to sleep, and go to work again for,
yeah,
well,
same.
4 months now. And I've noticed there's a real difference between key workers and people who have been furloughed,
Yeah,
because all the people who've been furloughed, they've come out and they're expecting, uh, The Walking Dead or 28 Days Later, you know. Whereas as a key worker, I personally don't feel scared of it anymore because
no,
we've been through the whole business of having to face this thing and confront it head on. And when you've worked in a high risk or very COVID vulnerable place for months, you just lose your fear. And I've
yeah,
lost my fear. And I would be lying if I said that the kind of the social distancing protocols that have been in place since the centres of town reopened haven't been getting to me. You know, um,
mm.
yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Someone actually said this to me yesterday and said, you can tell, you can tell the difference. There's kind of uh, the people who aren't wearing masks. I can guarantee the majority of them are actually the key workers,
Hmm.
and the people that are wearing masks are the ones that have been furloughed,
Yeah,
because or that have been shielding, which is shielding fair enough, but furlough, I'm not so convinced you have much to worry about.
mm,
If you're of working age, you're a lot less likely um, to be to be highly at risk
mm,
with COVID.
mm.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, I've been quite surprised by my own reactions to how the rest of the world is approaching coronavirus because I've always been very supportive of some of the government's actions. I was very supportive of lockdown at the start. I felt it was necessary, but
it was necessary about 2 or 3 weeks previously.
yeah, but I think at the present moment, we do have to have some kind of process where people are just reassured that they can begin to go about their normal business, um, as usual. Because as a key worker, there's nothing I would like more at the moment than to just go out for a beer and be normal, you
Yeah,
know, because I haven't basically been able to do that for 4 months because I've been working so hard. And you know, but I'm not gonna lie. I got on. I have, for reasons which I will not speculate. I have to get on trains regularly at the moment, and I
Yeah.
get on the train and I find everyone wearing a mask to be really anti-human, to be really anti-social,
Yeah.
and I just don't like it. And I don't like going into a pub and seeing screens everywhere. You know.
No. No.
Um,
I think it's the one thing that I hope does not happen post. When all of this has truly gone away, so to speak. To a statistically negligible level. I don't want all this shit to still be going on. I don't want people to be avoiding you,
yeah,
avoiding us, avoiding each other. I
yeah,
don't want people to be, to have to communicate behind a fucking screen just
yeah.
because they want a pint or a pint of beer or a pint of milk. You know what I mean?
Well,
It's
yeah, it's
it,
worth remembering that masks are not some kind of magical. Um, they're
cure.
not.
Yeah,
There's not this kind of silver bullet or this elixir which is going to stop you getting coronavirus.
yeah,
You remember the only way you transmit coronavirus to others is by coughing and sneezing.
yeah.
Because if it's in your body, it can't jump out by osmosis. It gets out by sneezing. So unless you're around people with coronavirus and they're sneezing everywhere, you
It
know,
can be that. I mean, it can get in droplets of your breath. But yeah, obviously a lot more of it is dislodged when one coughs or sneezes.
yeah. But in a wide open space, you
Mm. Oh yeah, if you're in a park or whatever, you've got virtually zero chance of catching it.
yeah. But
Uh,
I've been surprised at how my own feelings against the wearing of masks. Um, um, I'm surprised at how powerfully I've taken against it, and I didn't expect that because I've always been supportive of these kind of things. But I mean, to be honest, if when masks become compulsory in shops, I simply won't go to the shops. I'll buy everything I need online. And if the wearing of masks becomes compulsory in cinemas, I just won't go to the cinema. You know,
yeah,
I mean it is such an overreaction, and you know
it certainly is. As opposed, with this thing coming in, is it Monday where we've got to wear masks in shops?
it's 24th of July.
I don't know when that is. I've got a calendar in front of me. I don't even know what today's date is, to be honest. But yeah, so the 24th, we have to obviously wear masks in shops,
Yeah.
and now that the infection rate has gone down to a hell of a low level compared to what it was, the infection rate and the death rate, it just seems to me, that we're locking the door after the horse has bolted.
Yeah, yeah.
We're,
I mean, we are where we are, and
I mean, I know it's on about the second wave and all this lot.
yeah,
They want to try and slow down a second wave, but if we'd have stopped it comprehensively in the first wave, there wouldn't be a second wave.
yeah. Um, I've got some thoughts on that as well. But my thought on masks is, I just hope it doesn't become institutionalized.
Yeah, exactly. If this continues after COVID, then it'll be ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Because attempting to shield yourself from all germs is a completely impossible standard. We all have germs around us and on us at this second.
Yeah,
Everybody does.
yeah,
People have, what a lot of people probably don't understand is that there are mites that live in your hair follicles and eat the dead skin.
mm-hmm.
And the oils that your skin secretes naturally. No amount of soap, alcohol, or scrubbing will get rid of them.
Yeah.
They will always be there. They just, you know. So if you think that you can completely guard yourself from anything,
Yeah.
any disease-wise that could come along,
Yeah.
you can't even get rid of a small mite, a small arachnid on your face.
Well, anyway, I'm very spiritual about the whole thing because I feel that there's a lot of the left which are calling for compulsory mask wearing,
Yeah.
and it just doesn't. It doesn't sit well with me, and that's surprising, being a left winger myself. And also, it the it just doesn't fit with my own personal experience of working in there, and as I say, in a very, very COVID vulnerable environment for 4 months.
Absolutely. I mean, if anyone was likely to get it while still at work, I'd say that we were very much, high up on that list. But as it stands, only one person did, and
Yeah,
everyone else was fine.
yeah, yeah,
And he was fine. Even that person was fine.
yeah,
You wouldn't have known it, and
yeah,
he didn't know it either. It was only the test.
yeah.
It was crazy.
It's crazy, and yeah, but I am worried about that difference between key workers' experience and the experience of people who have been furloughed,
Yeah.
because
Well, they've been isolated from the real world, haven't they?
they've been nice. It's like there's a huge gap in people's experiences of lockdown, and it's something that I think I would be, if I was a politician, I would be very, very mindful of, is that your attitudes to this thing have been shaped by your own experience of lockdown.
Yeah.
Because the government's told you for the first time, really ever, well, certainly in a very, very long time, the British public have been told, right, you do this and you do this. If you work in this sector, you carry on doing your job under with these policies and this protocol and this equipment and this. And if you work in a different sector, you are going on furlough and you staying at home. And by the way, both of you don't take unnecessary trips or whatever. And
unless you're a senior government advisor.
And that, because that is so, unless you're a senior government advisor,
took a second to sink in.
You can do whatever the fuck you like and go to, you can go to County Durham and test your eyesight. Can you imagine a drink driver getting away with that excuse?
Exactly. I've only had a few ales.
Well, I wanted to see whether I could drive after I've had a few beers or whatever. But anyway, the whole thing. I mean, I think that people's experiences of lockdown is going to shape their attitudes going forward, and it's probably shaped them in quite radical ways we're not aware of yet. And I feel very different to a lot of the left that are calling for the mandatory wearing of masks. But that's how I feel. So
yeah, I agree. I just think it's not all doom and gloom. But the thing is, we'll have to do it. We'll have to obviously just go through it, and I don't mind. It doesn't bother me as such. I just think it's much of a muchness, really.
Yeah. Well, at the moment, I have to go on trains quite regularly.
Yeah.
And I wear my mask on a train because I have to. I have to travel. But any activity where the wearing of masks is mandatory and it's not absolutely necessary for me to do, I simply won't do it. Shopping on the high street, going to the cinema. If I can watch films at home, that's what I'll do, and that's sad.
Yeah. I've seen people cycling with masks on, and it's like you're not getting into close proximity with anyone. Why do you need to wear a mask? That makes no sense.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's the thing that people need to realize is that you only really need to wear a face covering if you are in if you are in close proximity, i.e., within 2 meters of someone,
Yeah.
and even then, for an extended, for a decent period of time. So if someone, like in a supermarket, if someone walks past you, like right behind you, don't worry about it. You'll be fine. If someone, quickly, if someone holds the door open for you in a corridor and you walk past them, again, you'll be fine. Just don't lick them.
Yeah. So, if people, if you've got a sneeze or a cough, it's probably wiser just to not go out at all.
Yeah.
But if you are, but only this month I tried to have a dinner with some of my friends, some of my left-wing friends at my flat, and one of my friends just refused to come and said, "Sorry, Alex, I'm concerned for my health." And I think, that's a real shame.
Yes.
And so what do you want us to do? To wear masks indoors when we're having dinner? I thought, are we going to have to wear it when we're fucking each other and indoors watching the television, everyone wearing masks? I mean, it's insane.
Well, yeah. I mean, I suppose in many ways, and this isn't a racial slight or anything like that, but realistically, Muslim women who wear the niqab, they've been all right all along.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, well, yes, I suppose. Yeah,
because they're covering not just the nose and mouth, but also the ears as well, which is a point of ingress. Of course, the eyes is a bit unavoidable, but realistically, they've been all right from day one on that score.
Yeah, I mean, but I think there is a slight difference. I mean, if you choose to wear the niqab, you're doing it for kind of personal religious reasons.
Yes, it's not. Well, not in this country anyway. It's not mandated.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the key point. I mean,
yeah,
people want to do it out of their own deeply felt religious beliefs or religious convictions. Well, then I'm absolutely fine with that, and I respect that. But when it gets to the level, I mean, I've seen journalists monstered on Twitter for coming out publicly against mandatory face masks and being called, a granny killer, being anti-science. And
there's only one granny killer out there. Well, he's already dead anyway, and that's Harold Shipman.
Yeah. I mean, really? I mean, I think there has to be some public education.
Yeah, like from an independent source, because it's obvious the government doesn't know what it's fucking doing.
Yeah, now we can talk about that. I mean, no doubt when we get on to, because one of the things we're going to talk about later is the recent travails in the Labour Party and the travails along Bailey, and I think there has to be some kind of public education for people who have been furloughed, because that it's okay to kind of to just kind of quote unquote get back to normal, and
yes, I've seen. It's interesting how the rules have been relaxed to, is it down to 1 meter now, isn't it?
Yeah,
and yet shops and everything have still got signs up saying 2 meters, so it's a mixed message. I can understand the shops wanting to err on the side of caution.
That's a good. Like, I still see exactly. It happens in my local supermarket. There's a little supermarket near where I live, and it still has a sign saying "Remain 2 meters apart." But no, is 1 meter. I can understand why some people would be concerned, and I respect those concerns, but equally.
But those of us who are key workers, the majority of us have carried on, and we've been fine.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, obviously, NHS nurses, etc., and doctors, yeah, okay, some of them have got sick, and some, one or two have died, and that's really fucking awful, of course. But they were literally the highest risk of infection on the list of the key workers that had to remain. Because they were being directly exposed to it on a daily basis. So
yeah,
you have to take that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean,
that's
uh,
one of the joys of the selflessness of wanting to work in the NHS.
yeah, and I don't know if this feeling is widespread, but speaking as a key worker, is that I just feel exhausted after this
Yeah,
virus period. You know,
burned out.
yeah, completely wiped out from the last 12 weeks, and it hasn't been a kind of gilded furlough life. It's been absolutely nose to the grindstone, long hours, many hours for the last 4 months, and you just get exhausted by it. And what you would want, what I want, is a 37-hour week, and to be able to go to theatres, go to the cinema, go to the pub, go for a meal, and actually enjoy the society, which um, you know we've been working so
Enjoy the good parts of capitalism.
well. Well, what I did, I've done actually to actually enjoy some of the aspects of the community,
Yeah,
which you spent so much time actually working for,
yeah.
But you know, we are where we are, so
We are, yes, and I don't, and there's still many miles to tread on this road. We're certainly not out of the woods yet. But having said that, well,
yeah. Anyway, so I want my final
let's
thoughts.
move on.
Yeah, we'll move on, but I want to just touch on this final idea I've had about coronavirus is, how because we can probably segue from this into other political events. I've got it's about this second wave. I have a theory that the last period we've lived through from like mid-March to now, I've got a theory that was the second wave. So
Could have been.
So the first time coronavirus was ever formally observed was on the 1st of December 2019.
Yeah.
A scientist detected what they called anomalies or abnormalities in the Wuhan area of China. Now, bearing in mind, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence of people exhibiting COVID-like symptoms in late December, January time.
Yeah.
And
but then again, like, this is flu season, isn't it?
Yeah, I know it's flu season.
Yeah.
But equally, you can't be sure it wasn't COVID because no one was actually concentrating at the time. So,
and of course, COVID is very much, it almost mirrors the flu. Yeah, but obviously it has it's a bit worse. We found out.
Yeah, but if that was a kind of little first wave, it wouldn't surprise me if the last 4 months were the second wave. It's just it hasn't been known as such because we weren't recording anything at the start. Anyway, it's just a thought I had. Anyway, that was a thought of mine.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's kind of like how, when people start worrying when you hear that, rates of a certain cancer have gone up. And this is a perennial story in the news. But realistically, I don't I honestly don't think that the actual rates of the cancer have gone up. Its detection of said cancers has improved.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that the infection, you know, the rate of cancer has probably, you know, been constant for quite a while. But the fact that we're able to now, you know, we're always making advances in detection and earlier detection, and also able to pinpoint certain genetic properties that make that predispose
Mm-hmm.
someone to a higher risk
Mm-hmm.
of certain cancers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not as bad as people. You know, there's more to the story than just than you would be led to believe of. Oh, more people are getting it.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily. The same amount of people are getting it. It's just that we're able to identify. We're able to identify those individuals quicker.
Yeah. Yeah. Shall we move on?
Yes, let's move on. Because one thing about the about a second wave is it would be exacerbated. Just one second. It would be exacerbated by a big public gathering.
Mm-hmm.
And what have we had recently? From both sides of the political spectrum, we've had a set of people who are protesting the lockdown itself. Not really going to get into the potential rights and wrongs of that. And there's also been, as a consequence, we mentioned in our last episode about the very sad events surrounding the death of George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
And there has been sort of protest gatherings all over the world, really, but mostly concentrating in America and Britain. Now, if you know, a mass gathering, and not everyone was wearing masks.
Mm-hmm.
Which was interesting, I thought, you know, because these are the same people that were advocating for, you know, on the left of politics who are advocating for it.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, you know, some were, you know, there were quite a few that were, but there were many that weren't. And of course, it is in direct violation of those guidelines that say, you know, you shouldn't have mass gatherings. And yes, of course, these, you know, the events themselves were important. You know, there needed to be a protest. I get that, you know, and you know, express solidarity. But I just don't see how. I just don't see that helped in the current climate. Doesn't mean to say that society comes to a halt, but I don't know. There's a time and a place.
Well, here's my feeling. Full disclosure, I did go on a Black Lives Matter rally in the place that we live in.
Yeah. Yeah.
From my memory, most people were wearing masks, although it was. It's an interesting thing because, from what I remember, there was a general feeling at the time that lockdown was starting to wind down. The government guidelines were still formally in place, but it was quite clear that we were winding down. You know, the death rate was falling. The numbers were still very high, but they were falling from a peak. And you got the sense, there was already a sense that we were kind of moving out of it. So you could say, yes, but there were mass gatherings, but on the other hand, we were moving out of that anyway. And it just so happened that this very, very hot political potato.
It dropped at a very, you know, obviously it doesn't detract from the awfulness that has precipitated it, but yeah, it couldn't have come at a worse time, really.
Yeah. And you know, I there was the people on Black Lives Matter rally that I was attending. There was a sense that people were trying to socially distance, and when I was standing in the main square where we were standing, people were standing 2 meters apart, and people were wearing masks. So whether it had any a long-term effect on the rate of infection or the death rate remains to be seen.
I hope not. I mean, I haven't seen anything that would suggest that it had.
And also, I should say, this is possibly a clue to understanding why, you know, how these huge mass gatherings of Black Lives Matter match up with the COVID thing. Is it was remarkable how many people on the rally were under the age of 25. I mean, it was a really, really young crowd. I mean,
I think that it is a generational thing.
Yeah, I mean, there were only about a dozen people over the age of 30, and I knew all of them. You know, no exaggeration. There were about 12 people over the age of 30 or 35, and literally all 12 of them were my left wing, in my little left wing groups in our city. So, you know, so they were all known to me, and everyone else was under the age of 25, and probably either from our city or from the uni. So, and also we should remember that the young people, in order of vulnerability to coronavirus, healthy young people under the age of 25 with no underlying health conditions are some of the least at-risk people in
Yes, they are. Yeah.
the whole country from dying from coronavirus. So the lion's share of the rally I was at probably was not at massive risk from coronavirus anyway. The big danger would have been to, I think, if they were coming into close contact with elderly relatives or colleagues, maybe older. But then
it's the problem, you know. You're not. It's not necessarily. It's not necessarily the first person. It's the person that they then come into contact with after, and so on and so on. You know,
so if they were just, you know, there were young people who were working and had been furloughed, or they were doing something else or at home with mum and dad, the risk was probably much lower than it would have been for other kind of mass gatherings. Say, for example, like football matches or anything else. So that's probably explains it. Of course, you know, there was.
But anyway, to be fair, we were supposed to have moved on. We're still talking about bloody COVID.
Everyone talks about nowadays is just COVID.
Oh yeah, but we were supposed to be going on to BLM.
Anyway, can I just talk about BLM, because
yes, please do. Yeah,
it was a fantastic event. I mean, it was really, really powerful. The fact that you know, the fact that it was a more or less spontaneous event of people under the age of 25, and on a really, really hot potato like institutional racism, which there are very, very strong feelings. It was an amazing event, and you did feel like it was creating an open political space, because it felt very, very different from Westminster politics, for example, the kind of cozy Westminster consensus, and it was never stated out loud. Things like equality in the country, economic equality, social economic equality, the way the economy isn't working in the interests of young people, interests of poor people, in the interests of certain working class communities, and you know, all of that was never stated out loud. Amongst the focus on racial politics, but it was, I felt a definite sense that it was just bubbling underneath the surface, and there was a real desire for change amongst those young people on the Black Lives Matter rally. And I thought to myself, you know what? This is real politics. You know, so many of my friends in the Labour Party who are on that rally, basically the 12 people that I know personally, you know, basically, who are, you know, they, some of them said to me, you know what, one of them said to me, you know what, these young people are the future, and this rally has really put me back in touch with what matters. And I thought that is so true. That's exactly the same feeling that I had. It felt a world away from the tedious Westminster politics. And when I look at Westminster, there are real issues within Starmer's party or Starmer's leadership about how the Labour Party currently treats its black and BME members and MPs. And you've got Joe Biden in America, who is probably in the early stages of dementia. And, you know, I mean, this is a man who, it's Joe Biden, on a side note, Joe Biden is a man who called cannabis a gateway drug in 2019. You know, and he's
that is the one argument I really hate. The only thing it is a gateway to is Domino's Pizza.
Yeah. Or buying a shitload of Amazon DVDs late at night, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
And you wake up the next morning and think, fuck, I ordered all that. You know, but Joe Biden's so old. He did deal when he was a young senator in the early 1970s. He did deals with segregationist politicians in America, Congress governors, you know, Southern Democrats who were socially and economically New Dealers, but complete racists. You know, I think the term was Dixiecrat or something, which were, you know, they were Democratic and sometimes Republican politicians, but people who believed in segregation. Because, you know, elected politicians in the early 1970s in the United States, they still believed in segregation. Some of them were elected in the period of segregation and hadn't moved with the civil rights movement. And Joe Biden, you know, they were his friends. He did deals with them. And I thought, we've got Keir Starmer in America with his, you know, there are serious questions to be answered about how his party is treating its black and BME section. Dawn Butler's CLP has had to close down because its black members feel so vulnerable. Joe Biden did deals with a segregationist, and these are the two politicians who the party hierarchy wants young people to vote for. And I thought that connected on the Black Lives Matter rally. I really felt that it was a kind of fuck off and fuck you mentality. We're not going to take this shit anymore. And it was incredibly refreshing. And I know what you're saying about, you know, social distancing and coronavirus, and I know that's very important, but there was a real difference. There was a new spirit on that Black Lives Matter, which I personally really connected with.
Yeah, it's been it's been a bit of a mixed bag. Because of course the main one that the big focus was the big focus was the protest in Bristol.
Yeah.
And you know, if you've been living under a rock, Edward, the statue of a very famous Bristolian, Edward Colston, who he was a bit of a philanthropist back home. However, it seems, I mean, I didn't know, I'd never even heard of Edward Colston, I'll be honest with you, but then again, I'm not a Bristolian. But it seems that he did profiteer from the Atlantic slave trade. And there had been numerous, there had been mounting pressure to remove this statue. And I kind of, you know, I get it in a qualified way, but at the same time, you know, you had Bristol's mayor on the radio saying, you know, after all of this had happened, saying, yeah, we knew about it, but we knew people wanted it removed, but we just don't have the bloody resources, and it's not it's not exactly a priority at the moment. So I'm trying to help people who stop people being homeless and stuff like that, rather than plowing money into removing a statue. And that is, and I do get that as well. So I'm very torn on the subject.
Yeah.
Again, just returning to the events in the finish, the statue was literally torn down and ended up being tipped into Bristol Harbour. Now, I don't necessarily think. I don't know. I can't really get on board with that personally, because it's mob rule, and I do not like that idea at all. Especially, and this is a thing, the comparison I was thinking of just before we started recording would be between, obviously, the Colston statue and the Berlin Wall. Now, there's reasons why they're similar, and there's reasons why they're different. The big one, the reason why they're similar is because they represented oppression of people. They represented some of the worst aspects of humanity.
Yeah.
However, where they differ is that Edward Colston was 300 years ago, and the Berlin Wall was right then and then, there and then, in that moment.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. There isn't. I mean,
it's a disconnect because yes, obviously, I do get that the statue needed to be removed. In the same way that we removed the statue of Jimmy Savile when that was put up, and then all the stuff came out about him. Yeah, I get that. I get that it needed to be gotten rid of, but I don't agree with tearing it down. Kind of a mob action, especially when realistically, I've said this before. People have no point of reference for this. Even if you are from the BAME community, none of you remember the Atlantic slave trade. Your parents don't. Your grandparents don't. Your great grandparents don't. Your great great grandparents maybe, but probably not. Great great, yes.
Yeah.
But have you ever met them? Have they told you their experiences? Of course not. You can't. I don't understand. It's like, but then again, I can understand being sympathetic to past, atrocities. Which, let's face it, the slave trade was a human atrocity. But then I had an argument with someone. It is to do with societal norms. It happened because we didn't think it was wrong. Like as a general society, it's just like, well, we thought these people to be inferior, subhuman, which is obviously a very dangerous thing to think, because it allows you to do horrific things if you don't consider them equal to you. And but as a society, obviously there were people who objected, like the late great William Wilberforce, who was the main driving factor in the eventual abolition of slavery in the British Empire in 1807.
In British politics, in British parliamentary politics, the major driving force of the abolition of slavery.
Yes, and considering we were obviously the major world power at that time, it was a big thing for us to declare that this is wrong. And the mad thing is, at home in Britain, there are accounts going back to, I think it was about the 1200s. I can't remember where I read this or heard this, but there was an instance of people being kept, or someone being kept in bondage, basically. And there was a big court case, and the judge's ruling said that everything about slavery is abhorrent to human decency, and then finished with the line, "The black should be discharged." And I think, I can't remember, like you say, I'd have to go back. I'll try and find it and put a link in the description of this video, because it is interesting. Because we have constantly reaffirmed down the centuries, really, that slavery, at least in Britain, is wrong, and yet we still obviously partook of it in the British Empire. But then after we had banned it in 1807, it is worth noting that Britain did divert a large amount of resources to the Navy to patrol the West African coast and to chase down slavers and to return their quote-unquote cargo. So we did. Obviously, we're not perfect. We can never profess to have been perfect throughout history. No nation can, absolutely none. But we did at least try and make some amends. In recognizing that we have now shifted to seeing this as morally wrong.
Yeah. I mean, here's how I break down the Edward Colston statue brouhaha. Is that when people describe the tearing down of the Edward Colston statue as, say, for example, jester politics, it's a difficult one for me to actually argue against, because it's right, I suppose, but it's kind of missing the point. I take what you're saying about mob rule, and of course, if cities and towns could get rid of the statues which it, for contemporaneous reasons, finds it doesn't want to put on public display anymore, I would of course prefer that. But I think the way I break it down is, I'm not going to shed any tears for the pulling for Edward Colston statue disappearing from.
No, neither am I, because obviously, he was. It turns out he was quite a naughty boy. On that front.
Can I just the way I would kind of I mean, there was also a point. I mean, it's true that pulling down a statue is not going to solve all the problems of society. It's probably not even going to solve all the issues surrounding institutional racism. But the way I've come to think of it is this, and you get a really, really good example of perhaps where my sympathies lie, in light of the more recent controversy in Bristol. It's like so you have all statues. Every statue in Britain presumably would have to would come under the authority of the local council, right?
Yeah.
So now, presumably, if you wanted a statue removed, you would have to put a motion in front of full council.
Yes,
So,
and apparently efforts were made to do this, but it was literally a case of just didn't have the resources. And why didn't local authorities have resources to do things? Because of austerity.
well, yes, and also because Britain is a vastly over-centralised form of government. There's ludicrous amounts of over-centralisation. I mean, local councils, in comparison to our European neighbours, our local councils in Britain have virtually no powers whatsoever. And also, if you have a fact where you have the Tory opposition, and the Tories can be always guaranteed to not remove anything whatsoever to do with the British Empire or to do with anything else, and you have a Labour Party which does not want to do anything to upset the apple cart or to turn the apple cart upside down, just wants the easy life and won't touch these political hot potatoes, well then it's probably unlikely that you will get a motion through full council to remove a statue. And that's where, and the pulling down of Edward Coulson, it was almost as if the BLM protesters were saying, we're going to take matters into our own hands and not wait for this political game to be played. We're just going to hell with politics as usual. We're going to take matters into our own hands. Now, of course, the flip side of that is you could say, well, it's just a statue. It doesn't eliminate homelessness. It doesn't. I
mean, I get it. I get both sides of that argument. I understand that it is very emotive for people, but at the same time, there are things that offend me when I walk around every day, but I get on with my fucking life.
Yeah.
And I don't think about it. I just crack on.
I mean,
you have to.
I'm not in favour of pulling down every statue of every person who's ever made a bad decision or ever done something bad. Or
are you chopping vegetables or something there?
No, I'm not chopping vegetables. I'm
pounding the desk or something.
It sounds like I'm chopping vegetables. I've actually got my pen in my hand and.
Right, okay. I was just wondering what the sound was.
Apparently, my girlfriend refers to. She has this thing which she refers to as my important voice. You're doing your important voice again. He puts in this important voice, but which is what I'm doing now. Is that I'm tapping this pen on the table for emphasis. It's like we could go up a rabbit warren pulling down the statues of everyone who's done everything wrong. I would not be in favour of, for example, of pulling down statues to former prime ministers, whatever.
No, even a Margaret Thatcher one, because at the same time that would actually provide a good public service, because it would become a public toilet.
Yeah, I mean,
I would gladly drive all the way to Grantham just for a piss.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, put her outside. Let the pigeons. Vote
with their asses.
yeah. Let the pigeons do their work on her.
Mm.
Who knows? Maybe we can even stick her in a northern mining town, and
oh yeah.
And
it would be good to encourage, darts players.
Yeah.
To have pictures of her everywhere in pubs and that.
I always thought it was funny that her funeral was paid for by the taxpayer, which is like taking the piss. Maybe they should have really conducted her funeral in the manner to which she governed the nation and put her funeral out to private tender, like maybe Sports Direct or Amazon or
the lowest bidder,
McDonald's or Burger King. Like maybe Burger King could have done a funeral, and they could have sent her coffin into the fires, behind those grills on its logo.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
in a styrofoam box.
Yeah. I mean, with Thatcher's statue, I certainly would remove her from the House of Commons and maybe stick her outside. Stick her somewhere.
Yeah.
Grantham maybe, but they can do with a statue. They can make do. But there's something. But again, this is how I kind of think of Edward Coulson is that Thatcher statue is kind of relevant to Edward Coulson because it touches on how the British state thinks of itself. And so that, Margaret Thatcher's statue had to go through several planning stages because, as you say, they actually had to make preparations for people pissing on it and defiling it, but they anyway. There's a kind of but they eventually put it in the House of Commons. But there is something really vulgar about that woman's statue being in the House of Commons, for political reasons. I mean, this is a woman who members of the Metropolitan Police, members of the army were walking around as police officers in northern mining towns, picking up groups of striking miners and cracking their heads open, and they were wearing police insignia without police numbers on. So obviously they weren't policemen. They had the uniform and everything, but they weren't policemen.
Which is a crime to impersonate a police officer.
Yeah, I mean,
which makes me wonder why PCSOs don't get arrested. It's exactly what they fucking do.
Yeah, I mean, but I mean that's one example. I mean, you have during her period of office, the arms of the state were used to run down the country's own energy sector, and this woman's got a statue in the heart of British democracy. It says something about parliamentary government in this country that they think that is an appropriate in the heart of parliamentary government in this country. Our elected politicians view that woman as the most appropriate person to erect a statue to.
Yeah.
That speaks volumes. However, but I'm not in favour of pulling down every statue, because I think, with any complicated life, there's going to be.
I think the biggest the biggest parallel to draw here is Auschwitz. Right. We don't pull down Auschwitz because we leave it there as a reminder of the crimes of the past.
Yeah.
Because if you try to erase history, you become in danger of repeating it. Yeah,
but I don't. I mean,
doesn't mean to say that statues should be, as I said before, I understand why why it was problematic for some people, but this idea of what's actually happened now with the statue, the Colston statue, is it's been removed and placed in a museum, and presumably there'll be a plaque there saying, he was a slaver, and he did some good things, but he was also a slaver. So but that's providing the full context then, and in the context of education in a museum rather than in a public place, which is more of a celebration. But the thing is, morality does change over time. And feelings become stronger. I mean, we don't tear down Roman statues, despite the fact that Romans buggered boys. And in fact, in the high society, you were seen as a bit weird if you didn't.
Yeah.
We now know that's completely abhorrent. But at the same time, we understand it in its historical context.
Yeah. I mean,
how is that any different?
I mean, it's a difficult one. I think Germany, I mean, the Germans' attitude to his historical past is something I've admired. I've admired the way Germany has managed to confront the reality of its historical past. And perhaps there's a lesson there for Britain, you know, because since the Second World War, I think Germany's done a very admirable job of actually confronting its own Nazi legacy.
Mm.
It would be a mistake to say the conception that that Germany has simply preserved all buildings and all statues and everything associated with the Nazi period is a little bit inaccurate, because there were things about the Nazi period which it did blow up. I mean,
absolutely. And some of it were done by the Russians as well. But
well, for example, Berchtesgaden, for example, that was destroyed, and it was destroyed because they were afraid it would become a kind of a shrine to Hitler, and it would attract pilgrimages from certain neo-Nazi or neo-Nazi revivalist groups. So it's not true to say that Germany simply are opposed to ripping things down. They have ripped certain things down. At the same time, they've also kept a lot of buildings as kind of negative examples. I mean, for example, when I went to Berlin a few years ago, and I went on a walking tour of Sachsenhausen concentration camp, right?
Mm.
And it's very interesting because it was one of the earliest concentration camps to become operational. It's operated since about 1936 or something. And it's very interesting because there is a police school just next to the concentration camp. So as you're walking down, you go down this really wide path, a long wide path with fences either side, and it's the entrance to the camp that one would have walked if one was a victim. And just next door there is a police academy, and it's a former SS training facility. That may sound quite an odd notion for the police to be trained in a former SS training facility.
Well, yes, but I'm guessing that they're not trained to the same standards.
Well,
you know, and I'm guessing there isn't SS insignia plastered all over the fucking wall.
Yeah, well, the idea is that the camp just next door provides a negative example of the abuse of power, and this is what happens when power is abused.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think I mean, anyone who, for example, anyone who wants to know more about the slave trade should absolutely go to the very brilliant Wilberforce Museum in Hull. That is a fantastic eye opener. Really, they have a representation of a slave ship in there, like a below decks, and you walk in to this section, and there's literally shelves, kind of like how, you know, kind of like the you know, some of the concentration camps, where there was literally just shelves and people were stacked in there for transport, and you know, that's what's happened. That representation there, and they've got dummies of slaves in there, and and then sound effects piped in of you know, people groaning and crying and things like that, and that's powerful. It really is.
Not familiar with that museum. I have been to the Slavery Museum in Liverpool.
Oh, there was one in Liverpool.
Yeah,
it makes sense. Yeah. Yeah,
well, there is a big one in Liverpool, and that's pretty good. I mean, it's very comprehensive. There's a section entirely devoted to Africa and African culture, the kind of transatlantic slave trade African culture, and you go through the whole museum takes you through the whole process of the transatlantic slave trade, and then the last bit's about the kind of post 1945 Black civil rights movement in America and things like that. So it's a very educational day, but I mean, I think as in terms of and the Black Lives Matter thing. On the one hand, although I'm not against Edward Coulson statue being pulled down, and if Britain now wants to continue to pull down its statues to slavery, I'm not going to shed any tears. I think.
Well, I mean, the thing is, the thing is though, where does it stop? Because no human is perfect. There's never been in human history a perfect human being. Even if you want to take it to whether you want to debate whether he was real or not, but not even Jesus was perfect, and in that case, should statues, I don't know if there are actually any in this country, it would be a bit odd, because obviously he was, didn't really have much to do with this country, but for example, should statues of Nelson Mandela be torn down because he was a member of the ANC? The ANC, used to strap people to tires and burn him.
Yeah, well, I think. Well, I mean, that's. I mean, can I just stop you there for because there's an important, I think, thing to say, which is that necklacing, which is the abhorrent practice that you're referring to.
Yes, that's it. Yes, necklacing. Yeah.
It's very controversial because, to the best of my knowledge, the abhorrent practice of necklacing is most associated with Nelson Mandela's wife, Winnie Mandela, because she formed something called the Nelson Mandela Football Club, which did necklace some people. And obviously Nelson Mandela's politics went in a different direction. Having said that, he was the leader of the armed wing of the ANC. So this is difficult.
But then again, it is possible for people who did or oversaw really bad things to reconcile, and Northern Ireland is the greatest example of this. Now, whether or not he can deny it all he fucking likes, but I know for a fact that Gerry Adams was pretty much head of the Army Council in the IRA. He always denied it. He's always denied ever being a member of the IRA, and yet I have seen testimony after testimony of former IRA members who said that they directly took their orders from Gerry himself. And and then you got Martin McGuinness as the chief of staff.
Mm-hmm.
But these people went on to reconcile and went down the political avenue, and peace, a working peace has been achieved.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Maybe we should try and we've been going for quite a long time on the one couple of issues.
Let's shift on, because we wanted to talk about.
Can I just say this last thing about statues?
Go on then.
My own theory is, I'm not against Edward Coulson statues being pulled down. I wouldn't pull down every statue. I wouldn't pull down even every statue of anyone who's committed political crimes in the past. I wouldn't even, but equally I feel that the Edward Coulson thing isn't the heart of Black Lives Matter. I think there's also something else politically in this movement which is more politically exciting to me than pulling down statues. And I suppose it's been a bit of a distraction from the other aspects of the movement, which I think are more interesting. Having said that, now that it has happened, I'm not particularly,
You're not going to shed any tears over it.
I'm not going to shed any tears for it anyway. Right.
But yeah. Anyway, so let's move on. We're going to move on because also recently happened the ongoing stealthy purge of the left from the new well, Blair 2.0 party. Not many key Corbyn allies were retained after Starmer took power. One of them, who was Starmer's running opponent, Rebecca Long Bailey, who became Shadow Education Sec.
Yeah.
And then she has now been removed from that post. I don't know if has she actually been thrown out of the party?
No. She's gone to be about.
Yeah, she's been sacked from the cabinet because she shared an article on her Twitter feed, and that article just so happened to contain a small bit at the end about a link, about a rumor that American police have been trained by Israeli, elements of the Israeli army, in which one of them has been this. I'm not explaining it very well. The knee in the neck that obviously was used very abhorrently on George Floyd, which led to his death. Now, I've actually seen recently on Facebook there was a video on there of Israeli soldiers stopping a Palestinian gentleman who was, he was quite angry at the fact that they were preventing him from doing whatever he was wanting to do. And he got he did get a bit violent with them, started shoving them and attempting to throw punches, and the soldiers, being soldiers, just lost their shit. And just so happened to put one of them just so happened to put their knee in the neck of this gentleman. So it does make you wonder, was that a wrong thing to have said? Because there's evidence of it happening. Yeah, again, I'll try and find it and put a link in the description. If I can find it.
Well, I mean, I think I can solve that quite easily for you. I mean, was it an inaccurate thing to say? No, it was. Maxine Peake, who is the actor that whose interview Rebecca Long Bailey retweeted, she maybe was a bit. She wasn't as meticulous with her language as she might have been, but there are worse things than there are worse things than lacking meticulousness with language, and one of them is supporting a racist apartheid state.
Yeah, and absolutely.
Subsequently, there's been a number of things which have come to light which have shown that actually, imprecise those Maxine Peake's language may have been, there is still evidence that domestic police in America have been receiving instructions and training and education from elements of the Israeli army and Israeli security forces. So, I mean, but the real heart of this issue is, and to tell you the truth, I'm flagging after our Black Lives Matter discussion, but the long and the short of it is, there was a real difference between Rebecca Long Bailey and Keir Starmer on the schools policy. So Rebecca Long Bailey was listening very carefully to the National Education Union and had raised a number of concerns about schools reopening. And obviously Starmer disagreed with this and thought that they should all be reopened as soon as possible. And, instead of actually sacking being honest about it and sacking her and saying, sorry, I don't agree with this, I'm going to get rid of my Shadow Education Secretary, he sacked her on the false pretenses of retweeting an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, and in the process committed a double sin. He not only sacked the only left-wing, one of the few, probably the only prominent left-winger in his shadow cabinet, and this was done by a man whose entire pitch to the Labour Party when he was running for standing to be the leader of the party earlier this year, was on party unity.
Yeah.
He committed the second sin of saying publicly that he'd sacked her on bogus reasons, but to be honest, I know a lot of people in the party, and for a lot of people, friends of mine, this was their final straw.
Yeah.
This is, a lot of my friends have left the party over the sacking of Rebecca Long Bailey. And it's a very, very depressing situation. It just confirms that Starmer he's not going to listen to the unions, which is an astonishing thing for a Labour leader, not to listen to the unions. But apart from that, he's just not interested in uniting the party, and he's just literally interested in parroting the Westminster bubble consensus.
Which is exactly why Corbyn was brought back with was brought in with such landslide numbers, because we were sick and tired of the nice smiley Blairites.
Well,
who constantly towed the Westminster line.
I mean, the really tragic thing is the Starmer, his coterie, and his insane supporters in the party and without, they really think they're onto a winner with Starmer. They really think they're onto a winner with this approach, and it's hard. I cannot, for the life of me, see where the confidence in Starmer comes from, because as someone who works in the public sector, who has campaigned for the Labour Party, represented it as a candidate in the past, represented the party at candidate level, has volunteered in a food bank in my spare time, has done all these left-wing things. He's just making the wrong call on everything.
Yeah.
And my real fear is, however popular he may be with The Guardian, or however popular he may be with The Observer or the Westminster bubble, elections aren't, the voters in the general public are not members of the Westminster media. The electorate doesn't live in the Westminster bubble, and he may have to learn that the hard way at the next election. And if you look at the polling ratings, he's not doing very well at all. If you looked at the kind of the positive approval ratings he gets, which are plastered everywhere across the Guardian and the Observer, literally, if there was a poll rating which said, that's the ridiculous question, like, who would you want to go on holiday with? Keir Starmer, the other one, Keir Starmer, it's like, they're all about personal popularity. Do you like this person? Can you imagine he's PM? Is he authoritative? But they're completely meaningless, utterly meaningless. I mean, you might as well say, do you want to go on holiday with Starmer? Yes or no? Is he the kind of person you want to go to the beach with? Utterly meaningless.
Yeah. What the fuck is that even?
Yeah.
Like, what does that achieve?
Yeah.
Oh, I want to go on holiday. Holiday? What the fuck? No, I want him to. What I want is for a leader, who will represent, a leader of a party who represents my fucking morality.
Yeah.
And who is actually going to enact that. And unfortunately, I don't see Starmer as being able to do that.
And if you look at the polling ratings, which are about politics, but not to do with the light, ephemeral, personal stuff, he's not doing very well at all. I mean, with everything going on, Brexit, coronavirus, austerity, the Labour Party are still polling 10 points behind the Tories. I mean, it's incredible. I follow someone on Twitter called Joe Sucksmith. I think it's Joe Sucksmith, and he put out a brilliant tweet. He retweeted the findings of that poll, and it was a brilliant tweet. He wrote in capital letters, "Starmer absolutely smashing it." Yeah. 10 points behind the Tories, you know. And
Yeah.
comparison's sake, after the last election, there was a lot of articles saying Ed Miliband was uncomfortable in front of the camera. He couldn't connect. He couldn't connect in particular with working class voters. He was hamstered. He was elitist. He was also too left wing on the economy. He was red Ed. You know, he was a socialist. He was a bad leader, bad on the media, bad on platform. Ed Miliband, in the same period of time, when he was leader, 2010, he was 7 points ahead of the Tories.
Go figure.
The Labour Party, under Ed Miliband leadership, at the same point in the election cycle of that Parliament, were polling 7 points ahead of the Tories. Currently, Starmer's, and they still went on to lose the next election. Starmer supporters think they're going to win the next election, and they're polling 17 points behind the Labour Party 10 years ago, and 10 points behind the Tory party currently. It's just utter madness. And I think we could do a whole episode on liberal impossibilism, because I think one of the curses of our time is that there's a lot of liberal wishful thinking around Starmer, and it's happening with Biden as well in the States. Is that there's a group of people who vote for the centre-left parties and do so consistently and think of themselves as having left-of-centre views, who have had a gutful of populism and now just want the quiet life.
Yeah.
They're voting for the safe options, and they're gonna get absolutely hammered at the next election. And you know, because ultimately there's no appeal. Centrists like Biden and Starmer in the real world, outside of the Westminster bubble and a couple of comfortable circles in the suburbs, there's no real appeal for that kind of politics anymore.
No.
You know, and I think my darkest thoughts, I think, you know, Starmer's just shat on an educations union for, you know, not going with him in following the Tories. But the Tories have destroyed education, and he's going to get a rude awakening in the next election, because those NEU members, they send their kids to school, they send their kids to comprehensive, they send them schools to state primary schools, and they are more in touch with communities we need to win over to win the next election than Starmer is. And I think that lesson is going to be learned the hard way at the next election.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think there is going to be a kind of I told you so moment at the next election. I'm sure of it.
I mean, it'd be very interesting to see what happens in November in America. You know, but
interesting, like when you watch a fight going on and you kind of think, you know, you see a couple of people fighting, you go, "Ooh, hello." What the fuck's going on here then? You know.
But we're gonna, you know, it's gonna be very interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, it will be.
At the moment, I've got no real hope for anything whatsoever. The only statues aside, the only thing that's given me some hope is Black Lives Matter and that Black Lives Matter rally. You know.
And at least it shows that there is a solidarity out there. You know, and that we're not completely out for ourselves.
Yeah.
But having said that, well, you know, I think there's going to be, there has to be a major societal shake-up soon enough, because we can't have this kind of the haves and have-nots in the same way anymore, because, you know, there needs to be a concerted effort to give people just the essentials that they need. They don't, because not everyone, of course, it's impossible standard to make everyone a millionaire or whatever, but so that everyone isn't crying their eyes out at night because they don't know how they're gonna make next month's rent, or they're going without food so that their kids can eat.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of Tory Britain.
Yeah.
It's directly created this, and then it takes a pandemic for them to begrudgingly say, "Oh well, I suppose we best help a few people out then."
Yeah. Okay, so
Yeah.
shall we wrap up now, because I've got to get ready for work soon.
All right. Yeah. No worries. And I will. We'll have to record again quite soon to make up for the fact that we left it for so long.
In our final episode, what am I talking about? In our final moments of this episode.
Yes.
I'll just ask you briefly, what topics would you like to do in the future? Because I've got a couple of ideas.
Well, anything really. I mean, infrastructure, would be a good one. Education would be another. There's many and varied. Even stuff that's not even domestic. Things like things like the refugee crisis. I know it's sort of taken a back seat now, but it's in Syria it's still very much a thing.
Yeah. There was something we didn't touch on earlier, but there was on the Black Lives Matter rally in York. There's a very large presence of something called Stand Up to Racism. Now, they've had a very interesting 5 years in York, and I've had lots of conversations with you and other people on the left about identity politics.
Yes.
Because there's identity politics I like, and it's the best bits of Black Lives Matter, but there's also another way of thinking about identity politics where it's not as appealing, and but again, maybe in the future, you know how popular our episode about Alison Hume was.
Oh yeah.
Right, I've got lots of things to say about the recent history of Stand Up to Racism in York, and it's very revealing, because to me that experience, the experience of Stand Up to Racism in York, says a lot. It's a good microcosm of what's happening with identity politics on the left more generally, and it's very, very instructive. So I might like to just rattle about that on another episode if I may. I think you'll enjoy it.
Good. Well, as long as we enjoy it, I mean, at least that makes two people, doesn't it?
But I think you will, because you and I think, have similar attitudes to identity politics.
Yeah.
On the whole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well-meaning idea, but very, very poorly executed.
Yeah. I mean, my thing about identity politics is, I'm not anti all identity politics. Obviously, if
well, let's not say too much now, otherwise we're gonna run out of material for the actual episode.
It goes. Yeah. It's a good thing which goes up its own arse, is basically what I want to say.
Yeah, I think a lot of well-meaning things do that, though.
Yeah.
Health and safety went up its own arse. Yeah, it absolutely needed to happen.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we can talk about that on a future episode, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Right then. Okay, then we'll leave it there, and thank you for your patience, ladies and gentlemen. I know it's been a while. We will try and be a little bit more disciplined in our timekeeping in future. We hope to bring you more and more. We hope to bring you more and more good content going forward.
Yeah.
On pretty much anything. If anyone's got anything that they'd like to hear us have a prattle on about, then by all means let us know in the comments.
Please, thank you for listening, everyone. It's really very much appreciated. Sorry it's been such a long time, but we do genuinely care about our audience. And, you know, unfortunately, as I say, life's what happens when you podcasts are what happens when you're making other plans. Maybe, I don't know. Sorry.
Is that a saying? I don't know. It might be now. Yeah. Anyway, right then, we'll call it there. And thank you once again, everyone, for listening. Please like and subscribe for more bollocks.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Bye.